Hi, welcome back. It's Rachel with the Book Mavens, and today I am reviewing a pretty new release, especially for us. Sometimes we tend to delve into older titles, but this past weekend for Mother's Day, my weekend was spent reading Fourth Wing. Now, this just released, I think it was May 2nd, so hey, putting out a review in the same month it came out. This is very exciting, and I really was very excited about this book. I want to talk about Red Tower. All right, Red Tower is a new imprint for Entangled Publishing. This is their first release from that imprint. And the coolest thing about what Red Tower Books is doing is that the first print run, all right, so the first editions, are all going to come with a sprayed edge. And you can see that, I mean, it's very well saturated. This is probably the best black sprayed edge I've gotten from any of, and this wasn't a book box. This isn't considered a special edition. This is just how all of their first print run books are going to come. So outside of Fourth Wing, I think they have, 3 or 4 more books lined up to come out in the next few months. And they're all going to have a really cool sprayed edge. So I really like that. I think that sets them apart. Now, the big thing about Fourth Wing, Red Tower, besides doing the sprayed edges or the stenciled edges, is that their PR team is phenomenal. There's been a lot of hype on social media about this book. Now, as you guys know that I follow everything, I did know about this book. I had pre-ordered this probably 8 months ago. So I was ahead of the wave, go me. But I was very, very excited when this came in because I pre-ordered it so long ago. There are going to be several special editions of this book. There's a relatively new book box from a company called Probably Smut. If you want to look them up, they are releasing this in their June box, which I think is still available. They have a tiered system, and it's pretty reasonably priced, I think. The tier that I did was $25 a month. I don't think I'm going to keep it, but I just really wanted another edition of this book. But it's going to have an exclusive dust jacket, so I'm very excited about that. I don't know if their edition will have the stenciled edges or not, but if you're looking to collect, that is an option. This book will also be Bookish Box's June adult pick as well. So you have an opportunity to be able to get that after the 20th of this month. Yeah, the 20th is when it renews. So after the 20th, you should be able to get that. If you're interested in getting something from the Bookish Box, just keep in mind that they're about 6-7 months behind. That's a whole video in and of itself to talk about that I'm not going to do. So if you're willing to wait for it, that will be a fully redesigned book. And then Fairy Loot, it's either the end of May or in June. You can check them. I would follow Fairy Loot on Instagram if you're interested. They're also releasing their own edition. So it's going to have a reversible jacket, but the jacket stays the same, the main jacket, and it's going to have a different stenciled design on it. So if you're interested, of course, it'll have foil on the hardcover and all of that fun stuff, and it will be signed. The Bookish Box edition will be signed as well. I do not think that the Probably Smut one will be signed. So these are the 4 editions I think that will be available here in the next month or two. And there's also an edition in German. Apparently, buying the German special editions, they have probably the most phenomenal edge work I've ever seen, if that is something that interests you. I refuse to collect books that I cannot actually read. I cannot read German. So those of you who can and love beautiful books, I would highly suggest looking into the German special editions. They really are very, very beautiful. Now, enough about the packaging. Let's talk about this story. So I was really excited because this book was really marketed to me. This is marketed to the people who like romance and fantasy, but still like a strong plot. I would say that the world building isn't very strong in this book, but here's the thing, because this is going to be a series. The second one comes out in November. The way that this book finishes, it's sparking a larger conversation. So I think the second book is going to be the world building. This is setting up the relationships and kind of the mentality of the people who exist in this fantasy world. All right, so Fourth Wing. It's primarily a book about attending a dragon military college. So they're 20 when they go in. I would classify this book more as new adult than adult. Kind of like what you would get with like Throne of Glass, if you're looking for like kind of an age. So everybody's in like the early 20s. And the big thing that I want to talk about with this book, besides it being about dragons, which everyone knows that I love, I will read any book that has dragons in it, that there's really great disability rep in here. So our main character, Violet, she has a kind of joint and ligament weakness. So her joints will kind of pop out, her ligaments will tear. So this is somebody who lives in a fairly kind of like a chronic pain condition. And is very familiar with pain, has always been seen as weak because she can't overly strain her muscles. She's smaller, she's more petite than the vast majority of people who make it into this military college. And what's very interesting about this is that Violet comes from a military background. So she had 2 older siblings. They both made it through. They both had dragons. Her mother is like super high up within the dragons, with the Dragon Rider quadrant. And it's just very, very interesting woman. Her relationship with her children is very interesting. But so you have Violet, and the beginning of the book, it does, I heard it being compared to Divergent. To me, this gives me more How to Train Your Dragon vibes with adults more than it gives me Divergent. But I will say that there are some aspects, if you all have read Divergent or seen the movie, the books are better, but but this idea of the Dauntless and how the Dauntless are kind of a little wilder, they can dress how they want, having more open sexual relationships, because they never know if they're going to see another day, because being a dragon rider, your life expectancy isn't very high. So it's kind of like a seize the moment mentality. So their uniforms are very customizable and things like that. It's interesting. So it reminds me a lot of the Dauntless, if you are familiar with Divergent in that aspect. Now, with Violet, besides the disability rep, this wasn't something that was just thrown into a paragraph and then left to the wayside. Her disability is present all the time. And what's really amazing about this is that they don't magic it away. There's no answer. She lives with this condition. She learns how to overcome a lot of obstacles she's faced based on her intelligence and her ability to problem solve and to make allowances for things that she cannot do and find workarounds. And I really appreciate that in a book. And I know the author, Rebecca Yarros, in her author's note at the end of the book, also talks about living with the same kind of ligament condition. So I feel like she put a lot of herself in our main character, Violet, which I really appreciate. It makes it more personal, and I was very attached to the characters in this book. So in this college, the first year, you have to undergo some tremendous tasks. So you have like war games. There's, you have to go through this whole very, very scary walkthrough where all the dragons kind of peruse all of these potential candidates, and not everybody is chosen by a dragon. And if you're not chosen by a dragon, you have to repeat the year. But there's like a lot of people who just die, and it's pretty brutal. But it's done in a way that is very easily readable. I wouldn't consider this the most dense book. It's very, very readable. You can zip through it. It's a long book. It doesn't look very long, but the pages are thin. It's a good size book, and I so enjoyed the ride. I was invested. I laughed out loud a few times. There's elements of found family with these riders kind of coming together. There's, of course, a bit of an enemies to lovers. To me, it's more like misunderstanding each other to lovers more than it is true enemies. But there's a slow burn aspect, and really, people talk about it being somewhat spicy. There's only a couple of scenes, and it doesn't happen till like the last 30% of the book. It's building throughout the book. When I looked at other reviews of this book. Some people were very critical in terms of saying that it was so heavily based on the romance. I don't really see it that way. I think that it was about survival. I mean, there's definitely an attraction that's acknowledged from the get-go, but it's really about our main character finding her place in this world that she never thought she would be a part of. Now, because of her physical weakness, her father was a scribe. So there are 4 quadrants. So you have the scribes, so they're like the historians and record keepers. You have the riders. You have the infantry, so there's your groundsmen. And then you have the healers. All right, so healers, there are some really gifted healers called menders, in which they use magic and they can just kind of like fix what's wrong with you. And some are more powerful than others, so that's very interesting. So Violet had been preparing to become a scribe. So she was never looking to, I think, really... Mama. Okay, sorry, I had a little bit of an interruption. I apologize. So getting back to the fourth wing, talking about these quadrants, they all rely on each other. There's not a whole lot of interaction amongst the quadrants. So depending on what duties they have and what's necessary. But you have this ongoing war that's happening in this book, but there's very little detail about it. It's just that it's a known fact that there was a rebellion, and the children of this faction that rebelled were forced into this conscription where they had to become riders. And that is because the death toll is so high. So it was a way to try and like keep the children of these rebellious leaders in check. Now, the leaders of the rebellion were all executed. And there's a lot more with that in terms of what the relationship is with the riders that went there voluntarily versus the ones who had to do it. And there's some rivalry between these two groups. So that's very interesting as well. I do think they're going to pursue more of that. There is this element that's discussed talking about history and how important it is and how easy it is when you have one generation that decides to delete aspects of history and rewrite it, that it just takes the next generation to start forgetting it and replacing it with this fictitious version of history that's now accepted as fact, and how dangerous that can be, which I think is a very, very relevant conversation in the US today. I don't want to get too political, but it's definitely a conversation that's in the works. So coming back to this, I find the romance to be very, very good. I did enjoy our male counterpart to Violet. Their interactions were good. The banter was good. I always like really good banter between our main characters. She has a really good friend, and then she builds more friends as she goes. She looks out for the people that she cares about. Murder isn't really Violet's MO. Okay, she really tries to give people a chance to do better, or to see her as not the weakest link to be eliminated, because a lot of people come after her because they see her as weak and somebody that's going to affect the entire, wing of their, trying to think in military terms, for their rider quadrant. And so that's very interesting, this need that she has to prove herself. And of course, the dragons. So there are many different types of dragons, and that's very, very fun. And to me, that was the best element of this book, in terms of just readability and story, is to learn about the dragons and their relationships these writers have with their dragons. It's amazing. And I don't want to give too much away. Some people said that this book was predictable, and it is. It has some of those kind of fantastical predictabilities. You can kind of see where things are being, or that you as the reader are being led to certain conclusions. I will say though that there were some surprises, and I'm somebody who tries to pay attention and tries to predict where the story is going. And no, there's some surprises. I mean, you can generally get the gist of where it's going to go. You know that, these dragon pairings are going to be significant. You can certainly make some leaps with that. But there are some surprises. There are some surprises. It is not totally predictable at all. And it is, I just want to say, it's a great, fun ride. And also, talking about representation, there's a lot of very casual queerness that is in the story that is just openly accepted in terms of pronoun usage, that just is readily used and nobody blinks twice at it. and yeah, some kind of general queerness with our side characters that was very, very refreshing, in the fact that it wasn't made this big deal. This is just accepted as part of this society. And I really like stories that do that. It makes it normal, because it is normal. And so it helps normalize the conversation and to accept people for who they are. And so I appreciate when they add those things where it fits. And it definitely fit in here. It didn't feel forced. It worked. And I really appreciate that. And so my final thoughts regarding Fourth Wing is that I really, really recommend that you check this book out. It is worth it. If you are somebody who likes found family, somebody who likes a little bit of a romance plot going on, and who really likes dragons and loves the interaction between people and dragons, this is a book for you. I can't stress it enough. It's an easy read. This is not a super dense book. You're not going to get bogged down. It's not going to take you months to read. It is a fun story. It is a fun story. So for any of you guys watching this, please check this book out. I do highly recommend it. And meanwhile, Amanda and I have been working our way through The Cruel Prince, and so we should have a review for that book for you guys at the end of the month. So look forward to that.